The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So when's the parade? What do you mean parade? Yeah, the parade about Mike McCarthy staying. Wow, I don't know how this is going to happen, but it is, I guess, because Jerry Jones released a statement last night, says he's sticking with Mike McCarthy next season, and McCarthy is going into the last year of his contract, which seems odd, but Cowboys have done business like this before. Jason Garrett twice went into the last year of his deal, and I guess once survived. I guess he's figuring he's going to pay him. Might as well have him work. That eliminates the Bill Belichick discussion, I guess. And even at 81, I think Jerry is still trying to get one where he gets most of the credit. And Belichick, if he came in and won one, it wouldn't work that way. So this is, well, not necessarily for regular season, because McCarthy's had great regular season records, 3 straight 12-win seasons. But they stink in the playoffs. His playoff record is 1-3. And again, with what the Packers did to them last weekend, it wasn't just that the Cowboys lost the game, it's the way that they lost the game. I don't know how you round everybody up and say, okay, let's make the big run so we can get to the playoffs again and lay an egg. You know, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially with all the good candidates that are rolling around there, including Jim Harbaugh. Now, I don't know if Harbaugh would be Jerry's kind of guy. Harbaugh marches to the beat of his own drum. I was told that when he coached at Stanford and when he came into Stanford, they were nothing. That program was like a 3 or 4 win team in the Pac-12, and he made them into even a national championship contender when they had Andrew Luck. But he would set up meetings with the president of the school, the president of the university, and would be a no-show. And the assistant to the president would call the football office. Oh yeah, Jim's out recruiting. You know, he doesn't really pay too much attention to people above him. And I don't know if the mix with Jerry would be that good. But it is an interesting situation with Harbaugh. He has interviewed with the Chargers, and you would think that if there's mutual interest, boom, done deal, right? You got Justin Herbert, you got the quarterback there, you got a great stadium to play in. The team has some decent personnel with Bosa. I mean, they got some players, and you would think that that's a place that he might want to go. But it does appear that he's using the NFL for leverage with Michigan, if that makes any sense. Now, he may find the situation is what he wants it in the NFL, but he's gone shopping in the league before and hasn't drawn enough interest. Now, apparently, there is quite a bit of interest in him, but he's playing one side against the other. And this was, I thought, fascinating yesterday. Dan Wetzel, who covers college sports for Yahoo and who also has written a number of books about college football, was on with Dan Patrick yesterday, and he explained exactly what they're going through at Michigan with the Harbaugh contract, and it's basically a cheat-proof deal. This is Wetzel with the specifics on the Harbaugh deal.
Look, if he gets offered the right job in the NFL, he's going to go to the NFL. I think that's a fair expectation. So this is really a backup plan. I'm not really sure there's anything Michigan could do other than some absurd financial amount or something that could keep Jim Harbaugh if he finds the intriguing offer. But there's certainly the backup plan. So it's, 6 years, $11.5 million guaranteed base with some performance bonuses that would make him either certainly the highest paid in the Big Ten, perhaps in the whole country. Some of these new deals, we're not sure all the details. There are certain clauses that are unusual. He basically can't get immunity from punishment for either of the 2 current NCAA investigations that are going on. One into whether he misled investigators who were looking into a bunch of level 2 violations, and then of course the Connor Stallion situation with the advanced scouting and the sign stealing. There would be a set deal that in future violations, there'd be kind of a matrix defined if anything else comes up, a series of fines, really laying out some different things that could happen in the future. He's trying to not execute this deal. Even if he were to agree to an extension right now, it wouldn't go into place until February 15th, which is pretty smart because right now his buyout, if a team wants to hire him away from Michigan, they owe Michigan $1.5 million. That dropped on January 11th. The new deal would maybe be about $4 million. But if it's not executed until February 15th, then that would pretty much be the entire NFL cycle, coaching carousel cycle. So, he would still be on the lower deal. Different ways that he could potentially be terminated. I mean, he's trying to get everything in there that he possibly can. It's a really unique situation because rarely do we have a coach win a national championship, also be under 2 NCAA violation cases, and have all this NFL interest at the same time. So as with everything with Jim Harbaugh, it is its own unique contract job search situation.
But I think Bill Self has similar language in his contract at Kansas.
He does, and that might be the path here. Bill Self wasn't about to leave for the NBA while he was working that out, though. But Bill Self is essentially unfireable, and it gets to where if you're going to fire Harbaugh for cause, it would go to like a 3. It wouldn't be the AD who could do it. It would be a 3-panel arbitration kind of stuff they do with presidents of universities. It's pretty creative to get as much protection for Jim as you possibly can going forward. And a quick aside, the NCAA has got a new system in place called strict liability for head coaches, so that if anybody on your staff, any assistant coach, any staffer violates an NCAA rule, the head coach is now responsible. And I think what Jim is trying to do here, and I think is going to become commonplace for all coaches, is that may be true for the NCAA, but I can't be fired for that. I can't normally, if there's an NCAA violation, the language would say that is cause for termination. I think what all these coaches are going to say is that's not fair. There's 100 people working in this football office. There's 25 working in this basketball. If somebody does something somewhere, I can't lose my $10 million a year job. So he's a little cutting edge on that one, that the coaches aren't too in favor of this new NCAA standard of punishment.
If Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL, is he obligated to talk to the NCAA with the investigation into Michigan's sanctions?
He is not. So once you're not an NCAA coach, you are free to walk away, and they mercifully do not have the power to compel testimony. I don't think we need that out of NCAA investigators.
Is it Harbaugh wants to go to the NFL? I'm trying to figure out, if I'm Michigan in this situation, like at what point do you say, we're going to move on here? Can they move on from Jim Harbaugh before Jim Harbaugh moves on from them?
He's 40-3 in the last 3 years. Just won the national title.
Yeah, but they won 6 games without him on the sideline.
They did, but it was they won half a national title in 1997, and the one before that was 1948. So Jim Harbaugh has a tremendous amount of support, certainly amongst the fans and boosters, and the school. They want to keep him. But I agree with you. I think there's only so much you can do. And look, if you want to go to the Chargers, go to the Chargers. And look, there's 7 jobs open now. We could still get Dallas. We could still get Philly. Probably not Pittsburgh, we're hearing now, but you don't know. We're starting to get into real franchise. This isn't like, do you want to go to Carolina and lose and get fired in 2 years? These are real opportunities. He's already interviewed at 2 spots. So I kind of feel like if Jim Harbaugh can't get an NFL job this year, it's not going to happen. And if you're Michigan, you kind of like, look, we'll pay you. We'll give you some stuff. We'll protect you. We've been behind you all the way. But to just walk away from them, they're not ready to do that. And that's just the situation. He's 15-0 does a lot for your juice on campus.
No question. That's Dan Wetzel of Yahoo. And he brings up a point about what can a coach be charged with being responsible for. And what Harbaugh has in this contract apparently is, okay, if they find, violations, the sign stealing, all that stuff, he doesn't get tagged with it. and still gets to keep all of his money, isn't fired, et cetera. And he, as Wetzel said, this is going to be the way all coach contracts are written. So basically you can do the whole Sergeant Schultz thing as long as you want. I know nothing. And I was just thinking about the Joe Paterno situation at Penn State when the Jerry Sandusky horrible scandal surfaced. And you had Paterno trying to distance himself from it, but he wasn't able to do it. Even though he may or may not have had direct knowledge of the horrible, heinous acts that were going on, he was ultimately charged with being responsible for the program and was fired. And, he was in his 80s, and it made sense for him to go anyway. But that's, they took down his statue. It was an ugly, ugly period for Penn State and certainly for Paterno. If these new contracts are written in such a way, does he, and it sounds like that's the way it's going, because coaches are saying, well, I can't, there's a lot of people working on these staffs. I don't know what they're going to do. He may or may not know. Now, coaches have told me that it's your job to know everything that goes on in your program. But the way this deal could be written if Harbaugh stays is, well, yeah, you're supposed to know, but if you don't know, it's not your fault. Interesting. This is Rick Spielman. Rick Spielman is continuing to be employed by CBS as an insider on the draft and the NFL, former Vikings executive, but was part of the committee that chose Adam Peters as the new general manager of the Commanders, and he hasn't left his day job, still doing that. So yesterday on a podcast that he does on CBS Sports, he explained exactly what his role is with the Commanders.
I have no involvement with Adam in personnel decisions and evaluation of players. So anything that when I do get back to being allowed to talk about these prospects is that it's purely, I think they do that on some of the infomercials. This is purely on my own and my own reflection. It has nothing to do with the Washington Commanders. It has nothing to do with Adam Peters or the direction they're going to go in the draft. And I've been working the last 2 weeks between the side job, evaluating all the Senior Bowl talent that will be down there in a couple of weeks. Now that the list is
for the
podcast,
for the
podcast, yes, not for the Washington Commanders. They do not get any of my reports. I do not want to know, and I have no in care of what direction they're going to go. But I do know this: as I went through this process with Bob Myers, who's a very impressive individual, the GM from the Golden State Warriors, and working with Josh Harris, who I know is the right leader of this franchise, the right ownership group that is supporting him with Urban Magic Johnson and with all the other partners. It is very refreshing to see how passionate they are about bringing a winning football team back to this organization. And when I went through the GM searches and was a part of those interviews and how we set up the interviews, how diligent the process was, how detailed it was. I was excited because interviewing all the 5 candidates that we had that came through were more than qualified. And I believe all of them are going to be a GM here in the near future. But I learned a lot of stuff too. I learned how different teams operate, how different teams run their draft process, analytics, sports science. So to me, as much as I was trying to interview them, I actually was really fascinated by the way the NFL has changed even 5-6 years ago, even 2 years when I was let go by the Minnesota Vikings on how things are advancing in analytics, how things are advancing in sports science. So it's been an incredible experience for me and an incredible learning experience, because talking to all of these top flight talent evaluators, you get a very good insight on how each of these teams operate, and you can see why they have been so successful.
That's Rick Spielman. So he's staying with CBS, continuing his day job, but is part of the committee that is helping to find a coach. And at the moment, it looks like Ben Johnson is far and away the first choice. We're going to find out more about that in the next hour. Tim Twentyman, who covers the Lions for DetroitLions.com, an insider, he'll give us a picture of him, but he seems to be the front runner for that. But they're doing their due diligence, and according to Sports Illustrated, Spielman spent from 7:30 in the morning until 11 at night checking out these other candidates for the job. And I'm sure that they went into this saying, Peters is our guy. I think that everything you heard prior to him being hired was far and away he was the best candidate. Tom Lovero's got it in his column today that Randy Mueller of The Athletic, he's a former general manager, worked for the Saints, he said it was a no-brainer to hire Peters. So they knew what they wanted to do, but, as he said, he had to check in with everybody else. And I guess maybe you need that for a little bit of leverage, even though Peters, when he was hired the other day, said he was a bad negotiator. And Josh Harris says, no, he wasn't. His agent did a good job. But, maybe you do that just to make it seem like there are other candidates. So it's possible that if Peters doesn't take this job, he stays with the 49ers, because there was a report that John Lynch, who is the general manager, would move up to another position and Peters would get that job. But I think the intrigue of coming here, starting fresh, it's a honeymoon period that you'll have here that you wouldn't have in most organizations because it's been so bad. And if you make the playoffs in 2 years, people will be thrilled. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But, I think that this search is being done the right way, not the haphazard, Danny, hop on my yacht and I'll try and charm you. It's really a thorough search, everybody working together, and I like it. Feels good. It's been a long time since it's felt this way. All right, next hour, Brock Purdy. Interesting sit-down with Steve Young and how he views where he is. We'll talk about that. And also, Tim Twentyman will join us next as we look at the Lions situation and the quest to get Ben Johnson here as the head coach of the Commanders. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All right, we have completed part one of the Commanders rebuild with the hiring of Adam Peters as the general manager. Next step is to hire a coach. And you've been hearing the name Ben Johnson over and over for weeks, and nobody's doing nostalgia about the Olympics. That's Ben Johnson, who's the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, who have, in a hurry, rebuilt that organization. They have become a really exemplary organization and are favored to get to the NFC Championship game as they host this weekend Tampa Bay. And we have Lions Insider Tim Twentyman with us. He writes for DetroitLions.com. And I want to delve into the playoff game as well, but our interest here is in Ben Johnson. So what can you tell us about him?
Yeah, really smart guy. I think one of the things that Ben did really well is when he was given the offensive coordinator job from Dan Campbell. He was the tight ends coach before that, the pass game coordinator. He sometimes you'll be a coordinator and this is my offense, right? This is my concepts. This is what I do. This is how it is. And everyone fits in line. Well, that's not what Ben Johnson did. Ben Johnson sat down with Jared Goff and said, Jared, what do you like? What do you do well? Certainly I'm going to have some concepts that I believe in, but he tailored this with Jared Goff. He built this with his quarterback, and I think that's why it's fit so well. That's why Jared Goff is playing so well. That's why the Lions are top 5 in every single major statistical category on offense. And really, that's been the strength of this football team. And I give Ben Johnson a lot of credit for, including his quarterback, the most important position in football, in that, building it around what he does well. And that's why they've had a lot of success on that side of the football here in Detroit.
Interesting, his rise is so quick. Dan Campbell, his first year, has Johnson as his passing coordinator. They'd worked together in Miami. And then elevating him that quickly to full offensive coordinator. We just had Eric Bieniemy here for a year, and he hung around Kansas City for years, never getting that title. What do you think that Campbell saw so early in Ben Johnson to give him the play-calling duties?
Yeah, he's really bright. I mean, it doesn't take long. If you talk to Ben Johnson for about 10 minutes, you'll walk away pretty darn impressed with how intelligent he is. He's just really smart, knows offensive football, is really creative in terms of his run schemes. Detroit can run inside, they can run outside. Obviously, they have a top 3 offensive line, which helps everything you do offensively. But he's just a really creative mind. He does a great job of setting plays up. He'll run something in the first quarter. Remember the look he got, and we'll just sit on that, and then boom, in the fourth quarter, he'll throw the counter to that when he gets that same look or sees it set up. He just has a great mind for offensive football. He's special, and I know the fans in Detroit will certainly be upset if and when he goes, but it's certainly well-deserved with how well this offense has played the last 2 years.
Talking to Tim Twentyman, who's the Lions Insider for DetroitLions.com, and we're talking about Ben Johnson and the desire here, it appears, to bring him in as the head coach. You mentioned the relationship with Jared Goff. Things are a little bit different here. You did have Sam Howell a full year as a starter, but I think with the way the season ended, nobody really expects he's the quarterback of the future. With Goff, it was a reclamation project. I mean, he had taken a team to a Super Bowl with the Rams, so it seemed like it was a rebuilding of his confidence. The role here would probably be with a top pick quarterback. They've got the number 2 pick in the draft. It's likely they're going to take one of the 2 at the top, maybe Drake May, or could they move up even to get Caleb Williams? What do you think about him starting from scratch with a rookie quarterback?
Well, I'd be excited if I was the rookie quarterback, to be honest with you, because I think it'd be similar to what happened here in Detroit. Now, you mentioned, obviously, Jared was a veteran guy, an experienced guy. There's nothing a defense can throw at Jared Goff that he hasn't seen, and so that's certainly different. But I would expect the same thing. He's going to sit down with that young quarterback, and they're going to find out what he does well, what he doesn't do so well. They're going to work really hard to fix those things that he doesn't do well, but they're going to build the offense and around what he does well. And I just think when you're resetting the offense, when you're resetting an organization at the quarterback position, put that young man in the best position to win, right? Mm-hmm. Find out what he does well. Let's tailor our offense a little bit around that. We're going to have to do some other stuff. So he's going to have to get better, but let's start with what he does well, and that's what Ben Johnson will give you as the offensive coordinator. He is going to, your offense is really going to excel at the things your quarterback does well.
Okay, and that's it is a quarterback league, as we know. Just to back up a little bit on Goff, when the trade was made with the Matt Stafford deal, it seemed to me like that was like he was being offloaded. Roll out his contract. You're going to lose anyway, and the future is probably going to be with somebody else. At what point do you think the coaching staff realized, oh, wait a minute, we got a quarterback here who could be our quarterback of the future?
Yeah, I think it was the second half of last year. Obviously when he got here in 21, they only had 3 wins, but they were void of talent around him. They started to draft well, get guys like Penei Sewell here, get a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it was really the second half of last year when they went 8-2 down the stretch, nearly made the playoffs after a 1-6 start. I think, and Jared played so well, and was the big reason why they were 8-2 during that stretch. I think that was when you really started to think, okay, I think he's our guy. But really, and then that was solidified this year. I think there were still some question marks, going into this year. But the way that he kicked off the season, the way this team started, the way that Jared has played really all season long, 4,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, is the first alternate for the Pro Bowl. So, I think he's solidified the fact that he's their guy. And then, you win the first division championship for this organization in 30 years, and then you go win a playoff game, and now you're sitting in a good spot at home in the divisional round. I think there's no question that Jared Goff is the quarterback of the Detroit Lions for now and for the future. And I think a lot of people forget he's only 29 years old too.
Yep.
He's been in the league 7 years, but here's a guy who's 29. We're not talking about a 33, 34, 35-year-old quarterback. He's 29. He's still got a lot of football in him, and I think it's going to be here in Detroit.
In many ways, this quarterback matchup that we have this week is symbolic of it's never over till it's over for these quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield, also number 1 pick of the draft, discarded by his original team, bounces to the Rams for a little bit, and now he maybe is going to be the quarterback of the future with Tampa Bay, and you wonder, are these guys being discarded too soon? Have there been some guys over the years that teams have given up on that might have a second life like these two?
Yeah, I think these two guys are a great example of that, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes you just you got to find the right spot. You got to find a team and a coach and a franchise that believes in you. And then you talk to anybody in that locker room, Detroit, and I'm guessing Tampa Bay would be the same way. You know, they love Goff. I'm sure those guys over there love Mayfield. You know, just the even keel that Jared plays with. You know, the ability to bounce back, never takes anything too big, too light. That's what's been so great about him. And then with Baker, you know, you love that fiery side, right? A little trash talker.
Yep. Guys
can get around that too, and that's their mentality. So I think you got to find the right spot, the right offense, and then the right locker room. And I think in both places that's fit for both those guys.
Talking to Tim Twentyman, Lions Insider. Now, I have said this over the past couple of years, how incredibly wrong I was about Dan Campbell. I was loud wrong. And that opening news conference when he talked about biting kneecaps, I said, ugh, what a lunkhead. Have seen these guys before. They're one and done. You never hear from them again. Did you at least roll your eyes at that news conference when he said that, or did you find yourself being a believer at that time?
You know, I think he just wanted to change the culture. That was really what that was about. You know, I mean, for so long, this was a franchise that just got walked over, you know, and they weren't physical. And he wanted to change the whole culture. And what endeared me to Dan right away was when he walked in here when he was interviewing, you know, when he was doing that, and they were walking on the indoor field. He got emotional because he was a guy that played here. He was on 0-16. He knows how hungry the fan base is. This is a football town.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of places in the NFL like this. Now, you haven't done a lot of winning in Detroit, but that's a faithful group. And no matter what, they were always filling Ford Field. And they were so hungry. And I think Dan realized that. He knew that. And he knew that this is a lunch pail city, right? It's Motor City. And he kind of tapped into that kind of grit, that lunch pail, let's go to work. And I think it just fit from the beginning. And so I don't think that speech would maybe fit in a lot of other places, but I think it fit in Detroit just because of what this city is, the mentality, the kind of work ethic and lunch pail type. And so, you know, I think a lot of people in Detroit believed, even though a lot of people outside of Detroit, yourself included, did not.
Yeah, no, I've seen that, you know, and I thought maybe that's going to work at the high school level or maybe in college, but these guys are pros. They don't need that Harry high school stuff, and it is working. And here's something else I read recently. You know, where we have all these like analytics-based coaches like Mike McDaniel and Sean McVay, guys who didn't play in the NFL and have studied film and the numbers and so forth. Dan Campbell is, I think, the only coach who played in this century, right, in the 2000s, other than I don't think there's anybody else. Is there anybody else coaching in the league that was playing that recently?
I mean, I guess you could, like Jared Mayo now, right?
Yeah. Now just named. Yeah, just in New England.
Now, yeah. I don't know. Was Vrabel around in 2000?
Vrabel maybe.
Still?
Yeah. There's just, but the point being is he's more relatable now. You know, like when we were growing up, it was Mike Ditka, and then before that even Tom Landry played in the 40s, and everybody had some playing experience before they could rise to head coach. That hasn't been the path in most cases recently, but here's a case where it has been, and it's obviously worked out.
Well, I think the players can respect that because Dan Campbell's not going to ask a player to do anything he didn't do himself or wasn't asked to do. You know, he's been here, he's been in this league, and so that's very relatable from a player's perspective. He's built a coaching staff that's got a lot of guys: Mark Brunell, Antoine Randall L. A lot of guys who are former players. There's just something about a guy who's been in their position, who understands it, that I think is very relatable to players, and that certainly is the case with Dan Campbell and a lot of guys on his staff as well.
Let's talk about this matchup. 6.5-point spread. The Lions beat the Bucs earlier this year. How much better are the Lions now than they played in that game?
Yeah, I think both teams are better. Lions won that game 20-6, but only rushed for 40 yards. This is a top 3 rushing offense. Tampa Bay did a really good job. And they've really done a good job all year stopping the run, but Lions didn't have rookie Jahmyr Gibbs in that game. He had a hamstring injury, and they lost David Montgomery in the second quarter. to a rib injury. So I think it'll be definitely a different dynamic this time around with your two best running backs, and hopefully they stay healthy. But look, Jared Goff threw for 353 yards and 2 touchdowns. They really got it done through the air. I think they want to be more balanced this time around, especially at home. Detroit's at its best when they're running the football, and then Jared can play action and do some of those things. But look, Tampa Bay only scored 6 points, but Baker was a little bit off in that game. They had gotten behind Detroit's defense, I can remember, 3 times, and he overthrew the ball. That would have been touchdowns on at least 2 of them. Mm-hmm. So they had some opportunities to score points and make this game close, and they missed out on those. And look, that was when Tampa was that kicked off a bad stretch of 4 straight losses for them. They are definitely a very different football team right now. They've won 5 of their last 6. Baker's playing really well. We saw that in Philadelphia, and so I expect this game to be much closer than Vegas thinks it will be. I think these two teams can both score. They play really good defense, especially against the run. I expect it to be closer than Vegas thinks.
We saw the reaction of what it was like to have a playoff win in Detroit. It's still a long way to go. They are favored in this game, would likely have to go to San Francisco to play the NFC Championship game. But to be in a Super Bowl, go Packers. And actually, it's funny you say that, because I was just thinking about this similar situation for the Redskins with the Doug Williams team, where Minnesota went to San Francisco and upset them, and it meant that Minnesota had to play at RFK Stadium, and that was the famous, Darryl Green knocking it away from Darren Nelson at the goal line with Joe Gibbs on his knees, and they went to the Super Bowl. So, if it goes that far, whether they have to play in San Francisco or they play at home, give us a perspective of. It sounds like you've been there a long time. Give us a perspective of what it would mean to the city.
I mean, it would be insane. I mean, that atmosphere last week was the best atmosphere I've ever been a part of in my 15 years covering the NFL. I mean, they had packed the stadium and they were in their seats an hour before the game. I've never seen that before, where every seat was filled 45 minutes to an hour before the game. I mean, they were loud. They were electric. It was 4 hours straight. My ears were ringing afterward. It was an advantage, too. I mean, look, the Rams had to take 2 timeouts to avoid delay of game penalties that ended up being crucial at the end of that game and allowed Detroit to run out the clock. And so they view it as an advantage. And look, the fans are going to do what they can to see this football team continue to win, because they haven't been doing this a whole lot for a long time now, and they want this run to continue. Ford Field, I think, has become one of the best home field advantages in the league, and Detroit and the Lions fans are certainly going to make sure that's the case again on Sunday.
Yeah, you could even hear it through the TV just how loud it was. So I'm really looking forward.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, it's a fun environment. If you ever get a chance, it rocks in there.
I was there for the Super Bowl. It was 2006 when the Steelers won, and it's a good city, and fortunately the weather was like in the low 40s then, so it wasn't too bad. But, not like the reporter who asked the question this week about Tampa Bay playing. I'm just saying, for the fans to be outside, there was actually
we'll be 70. We'll be 72 in perfect conditions in Ford Field.
Exactly. Hey, thanks, Tim. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
All right, that's Tim Twentyman, who is a Lions Insider for DetroitLions.com, and it's really a great story. I've known Dan Miller a long time, play-by-play voice of the team. He hasn't had many great games to call. He did the 0-16 team as well, which Dan Campbell played on, and I'm happy to be wrong, because I think they're fun, and he's fun to watch. If this works, and it works in Detroit, I don't know whether it would work in other cities, other teams, but it's working for Dan Campbell and the Lions. It's working for Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, who is hoping to stay healthy through the playoffs this year. Had he stayed healthy last year, perhaps the 49ers would have been in the Super Bowl, and we would have had maybe a rematch, Kansas City and San Francisco, but didn't happen. Purdy got hurt, but he's back this year, and back, and as Greenberg says, better than ever. Talking to Steve Young yesterday, we'll play some of that conversation as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We're in for Tony today. I'll spend some more time on this in the 11 o'clock hour, but I've mentioned it a couple of times in the updates. You may have seen this on ESPN.com. John Keim has covered the team for like 30 years, covered, of course, the entire Ron Rivera run here, and got Rivera to talk about what's next for him. And Rivera did say he wants to coach. Obviously, he's not going to be a head coach again. He says he's had several opportunities and would be interested in being a defensive coordinator. He said it wouldn't be difficult to return to doing that. Talked about how much he liked being the defensive coordinator here after he fired Jack Del Rio. Well, they weren't good. You may have liked it, but the team stunk. So I don't know how much interest there is, but he says there is, and I believe some teams are interested in talking to him. And he talked about, dealing with the, quote, stupid stuff. Well, it's kind of what you signed up for, though you didn't know those Washington Post investigations were coming and things like that. And then said about Sam Howell, he believes that Howell can be a starting quarterback. Well, he is a starting quarterback, has been. But he has this quote with John. He said, it was a big gamble. I put a lot on Sam, and I probably shouldn't have put as much pressure on him, and I think that was probably one of the mistakes I made this year. He didn't deserve to have that put on him. He's a good young quarterback, has some talent, has some ability, and I think that's something I should have backed off on. I should have been emphasizing he was going to be the guy that got the first opportunity. Just phrasing it that way would have taken a lot of pressure off him, just the kind that he hadn't been anointed. Well, based on his whiffs in the past, I think he was sort of in a position where he had to do that because given the unstableness of the organization at that time, they weren't going to really attract anybody. He'd already whiffed big time on the Carson Wentz thing. Plus, they got fleeced. They had to give up pretty decent draft picks to get a guy who was going to get cut. So they got taken on that. That Wentz was a complete disaster. He said that was his move. Through no fault of his own, the Ryan Fitzpatrick thing didn't work out. Okay, he played 16 plays, and that was it. And then going back to Dwayne Haskins, that's probably the first mistake he made. And I don't know this, but it would seem to me he committed to Dan Snyder that he was going to try and see if there was anything that he could get out of him, as opposed to looking at the draft and saying, yes, Chase Young may be a generational defensive talent, but we still need a quarterback. He went into that year thinking, maybe I can revive Dwayne Haskins. And being a defensive guy, he was enticed by this incredible college talent who has yet to prove what he can do in the NFL because of injury and whatnot. But, had he gone into that season with his eyes more wide open about what they had seen from Dwayne Haskins in his rookie year, the entire run might have been different. Might have. There's a lot of mistakes he made in personnel, obviously, where you've got Adam Peters coming in as the general manager, and he's asked about the roster, and he said, there's some cornerstones, but there's a lot of work to do. Meaning, we got a few players who we'd like to keep. And best case scenario, like 3 years from now, there may be like 6 or 7 guys from the current roster still on the team. That's how much of a rebuild it is, and that's on Rivera. Rivera was in charge, the ultimate say on personnel. All right, let's get to this. This is Brock Purdy, who's the quarterback, as you know, of the San Francisco 49ers. He made the Pro Bowl this year. He was in conversation for most valuable player. He's not going to win that. Lamar Jackson is, but he's had a hell of a year for the 49ers. And this is Steve Young sitting down with him. Steve Young being fired by ESPN. I don't know why that happened. I thought he was a tremendous analyst. But he's obviously got other things that he's doing. He's doing things with the 49ers, lives in San Francisco, and had a real interesting sit-down with Brock Purdy. And this is about the Purdy calmness that he sees on the field. It is unusual for a guy in his second year who was the last pick of the draft to be that cool out on the field. This is almost Montana-esque for what we're seeing from him. This is Purdy with Steve Young yesterday.
Most human beings, Brock, when things get more tense, adrenaline runs, things speed up, your mind shallows, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it kind of gets overwhelming. And from an outsider's perspective, it feels like your DNA, it doesn't work that way. From outsider now, it feels like, no, bigger the moment, the more calm you get in a weird way. Yeah. Is that what? Explain that, because other humans are like, well, how does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's been situations in my life playing the game where, just growing up, high school, college, where the moment has been pretty big for me. And then I had watched the film after, and I'm like, man, if I'm just watching this film and I take away all the emotion of how I was feeling right then and there in that moment. Like, I just got to do this, or I have to do that, and I have to go through this read. And so I feel like sort of going back to those experiences, I'm reminded of that in the moment. And it's like, I'm in a big environment right now. There's a lot of people going crazy and stuff. We feel a certain way because of the score, the situation, but I know that after this game, when I turn on the film and it's just me in a quiet room, like, all I have to do is drop back, look off this defender, and hit my guy right over the middle, or whatever the play is. And so I sort of remind myself of that. Like, I'm playing 11-on-11 football. You know, if I do fail here, I'm going to learn from it. And so it sort of takes out that factor of fearing to fail, you know. So I don't know. Those are.
Feels like you simplify it. It's like you make it simple. Like, I got to play.
Yep.
I'm going to run it. And then I'm just thinking about me now watching the film of it. And did I just do what I was supposed to do?
Yeah.
And that's hard for people to kind of be able to isolate that. Is that just something that just happens to you? You experience enough to say, because I got to be honest with you, most people can't, you can say, hey, just keep it simple. Mm-hmm. They can't do that, but you can. And it feels like there's something about your makeup that allows that. And have you thought much about that? Because it seems odd.
Yeah. Man, I always feel like there's so more, you know, that I could be better at and stuff. So for me to sit back and think, oh, man, I'm doing this right or this right, like, I always feel like there's more. And so I don't know if I necessarily have taken a step back and thought about it, but that's what comes to mind when you ask me, just in terms of keeping things simple. I just go back to the film, and I'm like, man, when I watch this film and everything's quiet, you know, it's not as bad as I thought it was in the moment, you know, in terms of going through my reads and hitting a check down rather than forcing something or you know, letting the moment be too big for me. So, and then obviously, like, if we're being honest, my faith, you know, tying into my faith, that allows me to just, you know, play and not be afraid to fail. Like, I know that, you know, God's gonna, you know, take care of wherever I'm at in my life, whether it's football or not. And so I'm actually able to use that when I'm making decisions and playing football.
Well, whatever works. You know, the calmness in the face of a storm. We're giving a lot of credit to Sam Howell during the season about that. You had offensive linemen saying, "I've never seen anybody who, you know, gets his butt kicked and comes back in and acts like nothing happened." Purdy, though, isn't taking all the sacks and isn't throwing all the interceptions that Sam Howell did. You know, they're both in their second year. Granted, he's on a much better team, and that includes Trent Williams, who's announced he's coming back for his 14th year. He's got 12 Pro Bowls, so he's got a much better offensive line and a better team, certainly. But this is working for him with his faith, and you know, I mean, who are we to question it? It's how he deals with life, and he's looking at football like, okay, I'm going to try the best I can, but God has a plan for me. This is more on that, the mental part of the game, which he said has become a bigger part of his game since he came into the NFL.
Growing up, I always felt like I had to be the athletic Superman on my team and win games. I feel like now it's like, man, yes, win games, but not with your body so much, but with your mind, you know, win games by making consistent, you know, the right decision consistently. You know, obviously going through reads, if I have an opportunity with the D-ball or something, great. If not, check it down. Like, that's winning the game, not turning the ball over. Obviously, I've had to learn the hard way multiple times this year with those kinds of games and performances. But, you know, the games that we're winning, it's because I'm being smart with the ball and I'm willing to check it down. I'm willing to punt and those kinds of things. So that's something that I feel like I've learned. And then just the other thing, just with life and stuff, you know, as a quarterback in the NFL, like, it's a long season. You play 17 games, 18 weeks. And there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad. And people, you know, obviously will talk you up when things are all great and stuff. And then the minute you fail and slip up, they're quick to say, all right, see, you know, this is who he really is. So as a human and as a football player, man, that's what I've sort of just had to learn this year, is understanding who I am and whether I do good or not. Like, I'm rooted in that and who I am, you know, and for me, it's my faith in God and that's it. You know, I am who he calls me to be. I love all my teammates and my family well, whatever the circumstance is, you know, so that's something that I've learned this year, and, you know, hopefully I can continue to build off that.
A lot of people I talk about other humans. We all struggle with perception.
Yeah.
It's like and I always say perception is. There's an old saying that possession is 9/10 of the law. It's a law school thing I learned, but I always change it to perception is 9/10 of the law, because if you're perceived to be something, you got this weight on you, and that weight feels very light on for whatever reason, whether it's Mr. Irrelevant or whether it's perception that you aren't Lamar Jackson and got the speed, or you're not Josh Allen, you're not 6'6", like all these perceptions, and it feels like we all lay those on you, and you're like. It doesn't say, you don't carry them around. There's no weight to it. Is that true? That you don't feel a weight to the perceptions that people have or the misperceptions that people have? It feels like you're free. And like, I speak about Mr. Irrelevant, you probably hate hearing that word, but it's like this thing that everyone wants to talk about, and it feels like you left it behind. And I just wondered how do you do that? Because that seems very hard.
Yeah, I mean, that is a perception that you can have, even for myself, like thinking like those kinds of people who say he's not this, he's not that. But again, like I said, my identity isn't in football.
So you just refuse. It's like anything that comes from outside, it just doesn't get through the filter.
100%, yeah. And it's easy
said than done.
Like,
of course you hear it. Of course you know it. It's got to weigh you down. And it feels like you're saying, no, it actually doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just my identity, not being in this football, this life, the things that can come with it. And it's all, such a blessing. I'm very thankful for it, and I'm not taking it for granted. But honestly, my mindset is I try to hold this all loosely, not try to hold on to, I need to be the guy, the starter in the NFL, this and that. And I think the more you think like that, the more you start comparing yourself to guys like that, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen or whatever, and those guys are great, but I'm not them and they're not me. Like, I know who I am. And God, if you want me to do great with this, great. If not, all right, let's go do something else wherever you need me. And that's allowed me to not put all this pressure on myself. It's allowed me to play free. It's allowed me to live my life and keep things simple. And yeah.
And it seems like there's a piece to the fact that if it went away, it's like, okay, what's next?
Exactly, 100%.
Playing with house money, sounds like, and his faith is that, I'm going to try the best I can to play quarterback and lead the 49ers to the championship, but there's a higher power there that's calling the shots, and he's going to decide, or she's going to decide how it goes for me. I don't know. I mean, it's not the way I live my life, but boy, it sounds like a great way to be calm and to go through life like that. I'm kind of the opposite of that. I don't really function like that, but it's working for him. It's working for him on the football field to the point where he has now become, and with Joe Montana and Steve Young, two of the best to have ever played the position, Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Brock Purdy is now the 49ers single-season passing yardage leader.
Man, it's an honor, for me growing up. And anytime I saw a 49er logo, I always thought of, you and Joe and what you guys did in the Super Bowls more than anything. And so then obviously I get here and I'm just trying to make the team. And then last week happens and they tell me after the game, by the way, you broke the record. I'm like, what? So
literally you did.
I had an idea going in towards the end of the season that it could come about, but I didn't know that I did it right then and there. And so they told me after, and I was like, wow, just inside. And so, but man, what an honor. And more than anything, man, you guys got the championship. So we just gotta keep it rolling and match that standard.
Well, you were the number one vote getter in the Pro Bowl. If I would have told you that a year or even more ago, that Brock Purdy would be the number one Pro Bowl vote getter in the 2023 season, would that shock you? Would it be like, oh yeah, like how, like that has to be something that you didn't expect?
Man, I would probably just think like, man, like, that's all God. He's got a plan, more bigger and more beautiful than that I could ever imagine, honestly. And yeah, I'm just gonna show up every day, work hard, and see where he takes me. And so, I'm very thankful for him, man. But did I ever expect all this kind of stuff? I didn't. I have no idea. So just try to show up, do my job every day, and it falls into place how it needs to.
It's going to fall into place tomorrow or Saturday night when the 49ers host the Green Bay Packers. It's a remarkable story. Somebody who wasn't just a late round pick, he was the last pick of the draft, and could wind up hosting the Super Bowl MVP trophy in 2 years. It's incredible. I mean, Joe Montana was a third round pick, and when he became a Super Bowl champion 3 years into his career, whatever it was, that was like, hey, wow, Bill Walsh saw something there that nobody else saw. Third round. He did play at Notre Dame, much higher profile in college than Brock Purdy. I mean, Joe Montana pulled off one of the great college comebacks of all time in his last game when they won the Cotton Bowl against Houston, and it was, the legendary story that he had hypothermia at halftime. They had to give him chicken soup to get him back on the field. And he made it back for the fourth quarter and pulled off one of the great comebacks ever. So we knew about him. I mean, nobody knew about Brock Purdy when he was Mr. Irrelevant. You may have, if you're a big fan, you saw him play at Iowa State, but not really that known. And to have gotten to this point as quickly as he did, there's a lot of things that went in his favor, including injuries to Jimmy Garoppolo, including being with the right organization. The 49ers, who, with Adam Peters, who was there, helped to acquire a lot of the talent. A lot of things happened for him in a way that might not happen anywhere else. But the attitude that he has, like, hey, whatever, I'll just do the best I can, and whatever the plan is for me, that's the plan. Latest from Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network is that Bill Belichick is going to get a second interview with the Atlanta Falcons. And he did that Monday night. He met with Arthur Blank, and I guess there's enough interest on both sides for him to come back. I think this might be the right spot for him. Now, we had Chris Price on from the Boston Globe this week, and he covered almost all of Belichick's run with the Patriots. And he thought, the best place for him is Dallas. He says this is kind of a Pat Riley thing. Pat Riley went from the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan to Kobe Bryant and the Lakers. Not that they have superstar talent with the Cowboys, not that Dak Prescott is anywhere near Tom Brady, but it's the glamour team. The Lakers are the glamour team. It fits. Well, last night, Jerry Jones put out a statement announcing that Mike McCarthy's going to be back, and he's going to be back with 1 year left on his contract, and that's not unusual for Jerry. He's done this before. So Jason Garrett, twice in his run, he lasted, I think, 10 years with the Cowboys. Twice during that run, he went into the last year of his deal. And, it's not a great situation normally because the players are like, who knows if this guy is going to be here. Plus, off what happened in the playoff. I mean, it wasn't just a playoff loss. It was a debacle. They were out of it almost before it started. And how about Kyle Shanahan's comment this week when he was asked about preparation? He said, we started preparing for the Packers in the second quarter. 27-0 is not an insurmountable lead. In fact, we saw it happen last year with the Chargers. That happens. But in this case, Jerry looked at it and he said, because it seemed like it would be a fit with Belichick. At least they would talk. At least there'd be, and maybe they did, maybe over the phone. But people have pointed out over the years the respect that Belichick has for Jerry Jones. I think part of it is that, he makes the kind of money that he could never have dreamed of when he went to work with Ted Marchibroda with the Colts as like a $50 a week gopher. But I also think that he thinks that Jerry's really smart, and I think Jerry's smart. His ego is such that he probably looked at the Bill Belichick situation and said, if Belichick comes in here and if he wins, he's going to get the credit. And I think we've had 3 straight 12-win seasons, so we can get over the hump next year. I don't think they can. I think what you have is a team that does not perform in the biggest moments with a head coach who, yes, he did win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Dak Prescott is Aaron Rodgers. And I just think that they have consistently shrunk from the moment ever since they won their last Super Bowl, which is now 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago. January of 1995 was their last Super Bowl victory. So or maybe 96, maybe even 96. So Yeah, I think this is going to be very interesting to see what happens with Belichick, and the irony of going to a team that he should have lost to in the Super Bowl. It was 28-3, and if Kyle Shanahan does a run instead of a pass, I don't think there's enough time for Brady to pull the comeback and win the game in overtime. And Belichick was the coach then. Now he comes to the Atlanta Falcons. I mentioned this. My nephew is an assistant trainer with the Falcons, and when he got married, Jews give cash. We like to give cash. I think cash is the best way to go for gifts. So my daughter and her husband gave them a cash gift of $283. And people went, what? $283? That's a weird. Oh yeah, 28-3. So the man of the author of the 28-3 comeback. And in fact, the Patriots ring for that Super Bowl had 283 diamonds in it. The author of that could be coming to the Falcons, and good for Arthur Blank if he lands them. That's going to create a lot of excitement. I was at that stadium this year. In fact, I saw Baker Mayfield beat the Falcons, so that'll be something if Belichick winds up there.